Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street, rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed fantasy wolves. Here with your Draftkings Week 7 preview. Got back on the horse this last week. Solid game stack of the Houston Texans and Titans game. Ended up leading to my best week since week 2, so I was thrilled to see that. Thrilled to get back into the green here with a nice, almost $1,000 week, and hoping to keep the good times rolling. Before we get into the specific daily fantasy stuff, I do want to talk about, obviously, the bombshell dropped last night. Holy hell, Antonio Brown's landing spot. Just days after hearing the Seattle Seahawks supposedly interested, were in the prime position to make the front-running effort, he goes to the Bucs. And I had actually ruled them out as an even option because earlier in this offseason, Bruce Arians came out and said, we're not interested. We don't want this guy. And this was a guy, Bruce Arians, who's coached Antonio Brown, has dealt with the behind-the-scene antics. So I was like, okay, no Antonio Brown to the Bucs is cool. Great as a fit that would be. Has a mini rapport with Tom Brady already established, certainly on a personal level, who's living with Tom Brady. And now Brady gets his little project, it seems, back. And what better talent to have as a project than Antonio Brown? Last time he was on the field was just as generational as he's always been. He's kept his nose out of the news, which is probably the biggest thing with Antonio Brown. It's never been the talent, always been the offseason issues. Well, he's going to be back, folks, with the Bucs in a perfect spot with the right quarterback to hopefully keep him out of trouble, keep him motivated, keep him going, and clearly some talent, both him and his quarterback and Tom Brady, but also around him, so coverages aren't going to be crazy. That's just going to be a ridiculous aerial bonanza. So I'm pumped about that landing spot. He can return after week 8. So in week 9, you will get Antonio Brown back onto the field. What does it mean for everybody else around him? Antonio Brown himself, we'll go into the receivers. The only clear winner into this whole thing is Tom Brady, right? It's got to be. Rest of season, I'm going to bump him up right into this tier, top 8 here. Goes from quarterback 14 to number 8 rest of season. Again, with those weapons, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, how do you not just go completely berserk? We've seen Brady have like a 30-point day with no one to throw to on the year. So that's where I see the big clear winner, obviously, Tom Brady. Then it comes down to where do we rank these receivers from here on out? I mean, Antonio Brown certainly has the talent to be the number 1, to take both Evans and Godwin's role atop the totem pole. I don't think that happens. He hasn't been there all year. Mid-season has to kind of learn the offense somewhat on the fly. Again, that history with Arians should come in pretty clutch, but it obviously does not help either of those two guys. So Mike Evans, who had kind of been falling due to inconsistencies anyways, I think it's a bump down right into this range. Devontae Parker, Tua, could be a little bit concerning. A bump Crowder below him. I think Will Fuller needs to be a little bit higher just in general since he's staying healthy. Chris Godwin, I'm a little more concerned with than Evans. I mean, Evans, as you see, takes that 5-spot hit. Deservedly so. Again, Antonio Brown, one of the best talents out there. But Chris Godwin, I think, plays more. They're already talking about how Antonio Brown might dominate slot snaps and kind of enter there as that number 3 in the slot, which obviously is where Godwin's done some of his best work. I'm more worried for him than I am for Mike Evans. I think he takes a hit right into this range, right maybe below Odell. And again, maybe I'm overreacting. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments if you're live, or whether you're watching it after the fact. Would love to hear what you think about Antonio Brown. And then Brown himself, again, certainly one of the better quarterbacks, maybe not the best ideal landing spot. We said, the Packers or Cardinals would have the most target opportunity, but this is a high-flying Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit attack. It's certainly above like a Darius Slayton. Like, give me, Odell sucks. So let's kind of have these guys slide in right around Higgins. I mean, certainly more upside, but definitely a lower floor. And we loving what Higgins has been showing. Probably rather have these guys than like CeeDee Lamb, to be honest, with Andy Dalton shitting all over the place. So yeah, that's kind of my fallout there. You see Evans falls about 5 spots to 20, maybe more, is in order, maybe below Chase Claypool, who again love above these guys at minimum. And then Antonio Brown and Godwin, I'm more worried their roles are going to collide. The offense itself should be unstoppable. It only helps. I mean, Ronald Jones wasn't much of a factor in the passing game anyways. more and more TDs potentially coming his way. I guess Fournette benefits slightly because more mop-up duty could be coming his way as well. That's my rapid reaction to Antonio Brown to the Bucs. Let me know what you think. Again, clear winner, Tom Brady, obviously. And then the wide receivers, who knows how this shakes out with 3 elite talents other than Brady kills it. Might be a headache each week, but they're so damn good. It's that division's such a shootout. I'm excited for it. And then I had to bring in Aaron Jones for the news, his calf injury, because he has the potential to break the slate. If there's ever going to be an Aaron Jones for 45-point week, it's going to be against the Houston Texans, the worst run D in the league, giving up by far the most yards on the ground per game. And it's just a smash spot for Aaron Jones. If he plays, he's going to go berserk. And now his ownership could end up getting driven down. Season-long leagues, I really think it makes sense to stash and potentially stream if Aaron Jones is out. A.J. Dillon, of course, Jamal Williams, where you look first. He's about 35% owned at this point. Dillon would be, as if this morning, he was only 9% owned. And those absolute fucking tree trunks, those thunder thighs, that man is an absolute steamroller waiting to be let loose. And we saw it already last week, 21 yards, just pounding it. The Derrick Henry comparables. I mean, the guy's 250 with speed. It could be the real deal. He could get force-fed against the easiest possible matchup should Aaron Jones sit. And if he does, I think he could light it up, in which case I'd rather own him now than scramble to the waiver wires next week. So again, right now about 10% owned. Sprint over there, scoop him now, save yourself the trouble. Because if he goes off, if Jones misses the game, then Dillon could be in play as a stream already. He gives you a flex option. But even just to watch and see what happens, a great player to keep on your bench right now, A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones, obviously, if he plays, he's in your lineups, though. And 7,200 still a great price for him. Last guy, Joe Mixon, has been ruled out. Gio Bernard's still under 50% owned. Doesn't make sense to me. He's kind of a must start anytime Mixon's out. We'll see 15, 20 touches. But to me, he's also a DFS fade. And we're going to start moving into our DFS kind of centric content. I see about 6 questions. Keep them all coming in, guys. You know I'll hit the mailbag. This show takes about 15, 20 minutes to rip through it all. And then it's all onto your questions. But let's now hit our DFS streams and takes. So Gio Bernard, must stream, top 20 running back this week in my rankings, right around what like Boston Scott did as a streamer, 20 points or so. Very viable. I am going to be fading him if he's 30% ownership right now projected on DFS. And I just like so many other bargains right now. Kenyon Drake, 4,800. This is the best thing to happen to his value because his ownership will now, Kenyon Drake, plummet. It's looking at 11% for Drake, but 30% for Gio Bernard, and at a 400 price difference. Pay up. Go get Drake. And then ultimately, if not, I'd like to pay down for Jamal Williams in case something happens to Aaron Jones during that game, as well as A.J. Dillon. You can either pay down or pay up, but I'm not going in on Gio Bernard at those ownerships. If that ends up killing me, so be it. But it hasn't looked anything special this year. Never really has, but had some more juice in years past, in my opinion. And the matchup is okay against Cleveland, but I think Burrow's going to come out slinging. Higgins is going to eat Boyd. I want to attack that game, but I want to attack it through the passing game elements. That's the bigger takeaway to me, is Burrow's just going to sling it this day. Let's now kind of go into our overview of the slate, where we just take a kind of holistic look and talk about some of the games that could go crazy. Obviously, any seasoned DFS player knows stacking games is where it's at. We'll get into our favorite stack plays in a second, but picking the games that can go nuclear is the absolute key. And last, we can just talk about quickly the over-unders. 78 points in week 1, Packers, Vikes, Cowboys, 79 Falcons points. Those two combined for. Hawks, Boys combined for 69. Cowboys, Browns, 87. Raiders, Chiefs, 72. Falcons, Vikes, 63 last week. Actually was not the highest of the week. That was the Texans and Titans, my call of the week too. They ended up being the highest scoring game, smashing the over. But still, you got your points. If you got the Falcons right, those were the stacks that won the Millie Maker last week. And this week, which games could go crazy? Well, they gave us a gift, keeping that Seahawks-Cardinals game. Even though it's been shifted to the Sunday night game, that game is going to be played, and that game is going to be a points factory, in my opinion. Who doesn't think that's going to be one? You got the horrendous secondary of the Seahawks, Russell Wilson just cooking, and then that high-powered Atlanta, the Arizona attack, that air raid. I just think we're getting back and forth bonanza. 56, the over-under there. Smash that. Hammer that. Fill your lineups with your Seahawks and Cardinals. We'll chat about them later, specific players. Packers, Texans at 57. I don't know if I love this one to hit the over, to be honest. That's the highest of the slate. And I certainly think the Cardinals and Hawks is going to be a bigger shootout there. Texans and Packers have potential. We've seen the Texans going berserk since Bill O'Brien got fired and in easy matchups finally. Packers certainly can keep pace with Aaron Rodgers on that FU tour, but there's a lot of weapons dinged up, especially if Aaron Jones is now sitting. I could see that game being one of the ones that disappoints fantasy owners. I'm building lineups much more in that Seahawks-Cardinals realm than the Packers-Texans. Obviously, you're not going to fade everybody in there, but then you got like Jair Alexander. What if he takes Fuller out? It's a tricky game to attack. Lions-Falcons is the other one, and I feel like Detroit just like they're just meh for stacking. But this could be the week they finally blow it out the water. You have obviously the most points allowed to quarterbacks with the Falcons on the other side. So Stafford's in play, Golladay, even Marvin Jones. But then also the Falcons, as long as Julio plays, that offense shall remain as high-powered as anything out there. We saw it last week, 40 points against the Vikes. They're playing some fired-up ball with fucking loser coach now gone there, Dan Quinn. So I like them to put up some points. I like the Falcons to have to chase, and they can put up their points too. So to me, I really like the Seahawks, Cardinals, Lions, Falcons. But my favorite sneaky stack is going to come from the Steelers and Titans. Only 50.5 over-under. I'm going to hit that all day at the over. The Titans have been going absolutely crazy. 32, 42 points over these last 4 weeks. I mean, just going bananas on the scoreboards. And their defense is garbage too. It's like a mini Seahawks that people aren't recognizing. Like a quarterback that's highly efficient, putting up touchdown after touchdown in Tannehill. I get the Steelers. Yeah, tougher D, but I mean, Wentz put up points on them. They have not been the steel curtain that's like, you can't go against these guys. At least not at every position. I'm nervous about Henry, sure, but I think that passing game will put up its points. I think Big Ben on the other side with his full complement of weapons can also put up some huge points. So I like that Steelers-Titans game, 50.5. I think that smashes the over and is a sneaky source of some DFS value for this week. And then on that note for the slate overview, if you're given this gift, take from your gift bag. Get your Kyler Murray at 7,100. Get your Christian Kirk, 4,900. Kenyon Drake, 4,800. Obviously Hopkins, 82. Like those guys in the Seattle, the Arizona attack, love them all. You got to love DK Metcalf, prime time. I mean, we saw it last week, just getting peppered with 10 targets, coming down with 6. The guy is just a monster. That rapport is great. Good run it back. He'll eat Dre Kirkpatrick for lunch. You could obviously get Lockett back into his blow-up spot. You know Seattle, even though the points against aren't great for Arizona, like we know Seattle's putting up their points. You know Arizona is going to be eating on the other side. We got to go after that game. That's it. And you get the Sunday night action to settle in. Hopefully your other players, your other pieces have blown up and it's like, okay, how high am I getting here, baby? In every sense of the word. But I can't wait for Sunday night football, and you have to grab tons of your lineup should be centered around that game, no doubt. They gifted us that. Thank you, DraftKings. Much appreciated. And last but not least, we mentioned Aaron Jones at the top, but that's going to be the key. That Houston defense is the definition of a smash play. Anytime a decent running back's against them, never mind Aaron Jones, we know he's got 50-point upside. This is the spot where he hits 50 points and now suddenly gets a calf strain. I bet you it's nothing crazy. My take on this is nothing to worry about. Mild calf strain. He says he's going to do everything he can do to get out there. And if that's the case at 7-2 against this defense, now with his ownership, which was probably going to be in the 30% range, now driven down to like 10%. We saw even with Mixon a couple weeks ago, driven down to under 5%. If that happens with Jones, good Lord. I don't think it will go that crazy. But Mixon, pre-game injury, everybody worried, 3% ownership. He put up 40 points against the Jags. And that guy won the Millie Maker. So I'm not going to be fading Aaron Jones if he's in there. In fact, I like the fact that his ownership should be driven down. That defense is too much of a joke. It's going to take 2 runs for this dude to hit value. But if he's out, then obviously Jamal Williams at 4,000. And the pivot there, A.J. Dillon, the steamroller, the tree trunks, the thunder thighs, could go absolutely crazy at 4K as well. I just think the winning lineup is going to have a Packers running back in it this week. It's a matter of which one does it end up being. Does Jones get re-injured mid-game and suddenly Dillon at 4K and nobody owning him go berserk? A Packer running back's going to win someone $1 million. It's going to be Aaron Jones most likely, but if he sits or if he gets re-injured, somebody has those other guys in, could go completely crazy. Alrighty, guys, this is going to bring us to our next segment here. Let me get the banner off because I have learned from my previous sins so I can show you our new transitions.
Murray fires, touchdown, and it's DeAndre Hopkins.
Alrighty, folks, we are now here for the top stacks and run it backs of week 6. As we talked about, stacking those games is the most crucial key to any DFS wins. In fact, all 6 lineups so far in the Millie Makers have had the QB and 2 of his top catchers. 4 of those 6 have been with 2 receivers. 2 of them have been a receiver and a tight end, but it's always 2 pass catchers, a QB so far. So that gives us a pretty clear-cut blueprint to follow to win that Millie Maker. It's all about the stacks. And then 5 of those 6 teams that won the Millie Maker also ran it back on the other side. It's a pretty simple concept, right? What game goes crazy? Where are the points going to be? Last week, for example, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Hayden Hurst, not Calvin Ridley, intriguing stack. Both Jones and Hurst very underowned compared to Ridley. And then they ran it back with Jefferson on the other side. We did say that could be a Millie-making stack last week. It certainly was. And a nice contrarian play with Matt Ryan there at 4% owned. But for me, the value stack of the week, I will say no QB's been cheaper than 6,300. That's won a Millie Maker this year. But this could be the week that breaks because Joe Burrow is 5,500. He also gets T. Higgins at 5,300. That's even a typo there. T. Higgins is 53, not 54. Let me just fix that real quick. So even cheaper than Tyler Boyd. I mean, that's a smash. That's an absolute smash. T. Higgins, Burrow under 11K. And then you could also stack in Boyd. Run it back with Kareem Hunt at 25% owned. Yeah, he's going to be pretty chalky. He's one of the ones when we get to chalk talk that I'm willing to eat for sure. Love Kareem Hunt this week. That team put up 215 and 3 touchdowns on the ground last time they faced the Bengals. It's going to happen. And then you're going to get Burrow, who had 25 fantasy points last time he faced the Browns. And that was without him and Higgins really cooking yet. AJ Green even had 100 yards, the biggest bag of dirt in the NFL right now, who I've been vehemently spitting against. He had a big day too. So I really like this Bengals passing game. Mixing out going to mean even more on Joe Burrow's shoulders. It's a good way to also fade Gio Bernard, or you can work him in because he's going to catch his balls too. But I love Higgins, I love Boyd, and I love Burrow stacking that game, running it back with Hunt. I mentioned at the top, but one of my favorite contrarian plays of the week is going after that Tennessee-Pittsburgh game. 2 undefeated teams. That just it brewing to be one of those back and forth battles. And Tennessee doesn't have the defense to get into like a slugfest. They have to get into a aerial, just bombs away. And that makes me love me some Brian Tannehill again. Only 300 price increase despite dropping, 35 fantasy points last week. My play of the week. Why not go back to the well with him and A.J. Brown? Only 6,300. We're seeing Travis fucking Fulgham go completely berserk against the Steelers. This is not the defense that was, you have to fade against this team. No, not at all. You could also go on the other side. And again, all those guys, Tannehill, under 3% owned projected. Brown under 5% owned projected right now. Big Ben under 2% owned projection with Claypool 6%. Diontae right around 11%, the chalkiest of all these names. You could go either side. Definitely a great run it back too, because again, I like both sides of this one. I think we end up getting the over-unders at 50.5 right now. I bet these teams hit 60 combined at least. What if we get OT? So many good options within this game. So I love attacking this game at very few ownership, the game that could end up being the highest scoring of the week. But of course, we don't want to spend too much time anywhere else here. It's Kyler Murray smash week, 7,100. He's going to be the most owned quarterback, and he deserves to be the most owned quarterback. And it's obvious as it gets as a stack, Hopkins will destroy those Seattle corners, giving up the most points to all positions, all wide receivers across the board, but especially wide receiver ones. It's like 12 points above their adjusted expectation points. So yeah, the ankle's a little bit of a concern. Sure, last week's dud against the Cowboys in a smash spot, maybe that drives down ownership a little bit. Murray and Hopkins are going to destroy this team. If you want to, of course, the double stack is always the right play according to recency. But Christian Kirk, 4,900, you could totally just stack him and Kyler if you want to pay up elsewhere and not go for Hopkins. But either way, you can run it back with either or both potential Seattle receivers in Lockett, 6,600, DK, 7,200. I prefer DK just because every single week it's 4 catches, it's 90 yards, it's a TD at minimum. That's the floor. Whereas Lockett's floor is a little bit where both had the same ceiling too. And I think Kirkpatrick is not going to be able to keep up at all with DK Metcalf. I think he destroys him all day. So that's my favorite stack of the week, going all in on that game, running it back with that game. Carson is also a good play at like 6'3", I want to say, 6,300. Good contrarian, good way to pivot from those chalky running backs, which we're going to talk about right now. So let's transition on over to the Chalk Talk segment, where we look at the ownership projections, who's projected to be the highest owned, which ones that, like last week, we nailed it. Derrick Henry, finally. This is the segment I've been struggling with the most, is which running backs, which high-owned guys to go in. But last week, it was just like, how is it not clear? It's Derrick Henry. You fade Alex Madison. They're $100 difference between them. Like, how's that even $100 difference? Like, why is it not a $700 difference? They shouldn't have been even in the same conversation with Henry facing Houston. And we saw what happened. So thankfully that one ended up being right. 26% owned was the right chalk to eat last week. This week, let's look at some of the highest projected owned guys. And if we want to play them, if we want to fade them. Kamara, 7,900. I mean, no other receivers there. So no Mike Thomas, no Emmanuel Sanders. How does he not get relentlessly peppered? He's probably going to play out wide for whatever snaps they play Latavius Murray in. So even if he's projected for 33 or higher, I feel like if you don't have Kamara, your lineup is all of a sudden out of it, like already. The one play could be pivoting away to Murray at 4,800, and then Murray ends up hitting, 2 sick touchdowns. They're going to try to be physical early on. Carolina, obviously the worst run defense in the league, or one of the worst. So that could go the route. Latavius Murray pound him, and you get 2 touchdowns, and he ends up, though, Kamara's going to put up 20-something at minimum. He could go for 40-something, depending on how many times Murray scores. So the Murray play is going to be like maybe Murray gets to 20 and Kamara only scores 23. So that price difference ended up not, saving me. I still got action in that Saints run game against that awful Carolina team with no pass game weapons to speak of right now. That could be a nice play for sure. But you have to have somebody from the Saints run game in, whether it's Kamara, whether it's Murray, maybe it's even both to differentiate your lineups. So that's chalk that if I fade it, it's to keep in the Saints run game. But I don't think I can fade that. It's too good. It's too delicious. But I will fade Gio Bernard, as I said at the top here, 4,500 projected for just about the same as Kamara. A lot of Kamara Bernard lineups probably going to be out there because you save with Bernard to pay up for Kamara, right? Not for me. I'm going to pay up for Drake, that extra $300. Mama's speech, baby, fired the guy up. I think Seattle's run deal a little overrated. I just, they've done decent on the year. And of course, it's like a funnel that, we always talk about those funnel defenses. Like, you pass against Seattle, they're that bad. But it's not like they can't be run upon. And with Drake running harder than he's run all year, it is good to see. And we've seen, Dalvin Cook was eating this team early last week. Alexander Madison had like 100 yards on 25 carries, the shithead Madison. The week before, Gaskin had like a 20-point day. So, running backs have done decent against Seattle. So I'm getting off the Gio Bernard. I'm going to pay up for Drake, just kind of pepper that night game and think we get the 35, 40-point Cardinals because we know we're going to get 35 from the Seahawks. That's what they do. 38, 35, 38, 31, 27. Oh, my good Lord. It's a factory. It's a bonanza. I cannot wait for that game. So I'm fading Bernard, going to Drake, or going to end up paying down for those Packers running backs, which, of course, is the news we have to make sure to track. The next highest projected guy, again, all three are running backs, Kareem Hunt, 25%. He's a tough one to fade. I feel like you can't have Kamara and Hunt, and I certainly can't have Kamara, Hunt, Bernard. just because of how chalky that will be. You got to differentiate. To me, Kareem Hunt's going to be in my stacks with Burrow, that game stack if I go cheap for my value stack. Otherwise, I think I'm going to fade Kareem as good as I think he's going to eat. Again, 215 yards on the ground this team had against the Bengals last time the Browns did. 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground. And then a receiving score for him. I mean, this team has given up the 6th most yards per game. They could certainly be run upon, the Bengals. But I like Ronald Jones a lot now that we have that game action. He's $500 cheaper, could score just as many points. Definitely going to come in at, half or even less than that ownership and could outscore him for cheaper. So I like Ronald Jones as a pivot. And then other than that, that's really the only mid one that I love as a pivot away from Kareem Hunt. But Connor as well, only 4% owned at 6,700, $100 cheaper. I like that Tennessee and Steelers game, and Tennessee can certainly be run up. You're getting 100 yards and a TD from Connor, it seems like, every week. The dude is having an amazing bounce back year. I keep saying sell high because I think he's going to get hurt, but until he does, he's great. Great play. So I like Connor and Ronald Jones as some pivots away from the Kareem Hunt chalkiness. We're going to debut a new segment. I know Taylor can definitely hit a sick intro for this one, but the new segment here today is called the Midprice Blowups. I noticed while I was looking at every single Millie Maker, I got to do an article on this and really break it out, but pretty much all the roster constructions, they paid up decent at quarterback. Again, no quarterback's been less than 6,300. A lot of Dak at 71 or, Russell Wilson 74. Like it's been an expensive quarterback year. Matt Ryan last week, 66, under the 7K, but still not your 5K bottom barrel. But then it's not like people are also punting to get those expensive quarterbacks either. It's a ton of mid-price. Very few lineups are featuring the nuts, the most expensive guy out there. It's a ton of the mid-price, the 6,500s, the 6,200s, the 58s, the 53s that end up going times 5 their price. And when I say that, their price is 6.2. You times that by 5, you get like 31 points. That's 5 times your money. That's what you're looking to do, because 50,000, 50 times 5. If you can get 5 times your money, you're going to crush. Also, you typically need like a 4K guy to go 10 times the money to also get it. But those mid prices have really been the key to people winning millies. So let's talk about some of the ones that I love. Tyreek Hill at 6,400 and not projected to be like 25% owned against the Denver secondary that's very much struggled against the big play. Chase Claypool. Week 1, we had Corey Davis go deep against these guys. They haven't faced anything like Tyreek Hill. And they're about to find out, like, this is going to be the Tyreek Hill coming party, in my opinion. And he's going to be at low ownership. He's going to be at his probably lowest price we're going to see this season. I love it. I love it that he's not going to be, again, 11% owned. Yeah, a little bit high, but that's certainly not one of those things that is, I got to fade chalk or anything. 6,400. Get that in. A.J. Brown, 62. I mean, back to the well. Blew up last week. 20 points. It wasn't crazy, not nuclear blow up, but I think it could come this week. We've seen receivers. I got Fulgham last week? Put up a 10-catch, 150-yard day TD day. Like, A.J. Brown could definitely do that. He's that physical receiver that could really wear down this defense after the catch, get peppered. Yeah, Davis is back. Yeah, Humphreys will be out there, but in a game that's going to put up its points, I think we could get one of those wild A.J. Brown days. And at 5%, that you usually get those days when it's like everybody's on him because he's facing some crap like fucking Jaguars defense. But with everybody off him because they think the Steelers D is so good, 5% ownership at 62, like he could definitely put up 30 points. Fulgham freaking did it. Let me just keep reminding you guys of that. You don't think A.J. Brown can? So I love those guys at the above, like right around that 6,500 range. But man, are we loaded at under 6K? McLaurin 5,800 against the Cowboys. Sheesh. Claypool 5,700, and he's coming in at 6% ownership projections. Like, all he's done is get better and impress. He almost had 2 TDs and would have been 25-point day last week instead of 19. Still had a decent day, not 45 points. He could go 45 again this day though. Tennessee is horrible at tackling in the secondary. So yeah, even though Diontae's back, like that's getting people off Claypool. Come on over. I'll take him all day. And we've already mentioned Higgins, not Higgins. Higgins is a great $5,300 play. I think he's going to murder this Browns team that likes to kind of get back in a shell, susceptible to big run after the catch plays. I can see Higgins going wild. But Crowder, I do want to toss out there. Interestingly, 5,900. Last week, yeah, he sucked, but in every game he's had with Darnold, 7 catches, 100 yards, and TDs in 2 of those 3. So at 5,900 against a team he's already nuked, I could see Crowder being – nobody wants Crowder. I don't even know if I have Crowder in any lineups, but I'm like, God damn, he's going to put up 30 points or so. I'm not going to have him. Crap. But we'll see. I do love that loaded pool. I find myself going Tyreek Hill, McLaurin, Claypool as my combination more than any other at wide receiver. And then at running back, one of my favorite smashes this week is DeAndre Swift. 5,400 coming off a 100-yard, 2 TD day. I think we could get right back to that well. Wasn't the Millie Maker last week, but nobody seems to be recognizing it. At 5% owned, people are thinking it's a fluke. And 38% snaps only. I get the concern. I get the worry. AP was still in there for 35% of the snaps, but the diminishing of the AP's role, especially at the goal line, and every single week we've seen for 4 straight weeks AP's role diminish just a little bit more. And this script, if Atlanta puts up their points like I think they will, now we're in passing situations. Well, DeAndre Swift has 20 targets to AP's 7 on the year. We could see a 60% snap day from DeAndre Swift against the team giving up the most receiving fantasy points to running backs, which is his specialty. That's what everybody loved about him coming out of school. This could be another 120 DeAndre Swift day, 2 scored DeAndre Swift with more receptions this time. We could get 35, 40 points. And again, 5% owned. We just saw what the dude can do. Nobody seems to respect it. Gobble it on up. Thanks. I'll take it. I appreciate it. So yeah, those are my mid-price blowups. DeAndre Swift for running backs, those loaded wide receivers. And in this range too, for running backs, I gotta again highlight. We talked about a few, but Ronald Jones, Kareem Hunt. I love those guys, and James Conner in that range too, at that mid-price range. Alrighty, folks. But now we're gonna turn our attention to the bargain plays. We got 2 segments left, and then we'll be to your questions. So get them on in. Let's hear what you guys have to say. But Bargain Hunter here for our DFS lineups. Because, again, the one thing I've noticed here is it has never been pure punts in these DFS lineups. Again, as I was saying with the mid-price segment, it's all been about finding those 5 to 7K and just finding the guys that go for 30 in that range. That's been the play this year. But every roster has had some cheap options. You have to be able to fill a lineup with mostly mid-priced guys. Last week, for example, it was Swift at 4,500, MVS 4,600 didn't work out. Hurst 47 was okay, but no true like 3K. I got to find the bare minimum. Similar to last week. Before that, Claypool 4,100, Slayton 4,800, Freeman 4,600. Again, no true punts. So it's more about those under 5K guys that ultimately pans out for you. But if, again, we already mentioned Burrow, we don't need to dive into him again. I think at 5,500, though, this could be the week that flips over and 6,300 is no longer the bare minimum. It could be Burrow who wins that Millie prize. But Kyle Allen, 5,200, love that against Dallas. He's got some rushing ability. We saw him running a score already this year. He threw 280 and 2 last week. Nobody seems to recognize against a much better defense. Now he gets the Cowboys, who might put up their points. That could be an ugly shootout, right? The Cowboys in Washington. And if I like McLaurin so much, there's a nice easy stack. 5,200 Allen, 5,800 McLaurin. Gets that 11K, bam. And then Darnold, I mean, disgusting, 5K. But the Bills, that defense is nothing special. And you now have Perriman in. First time that he's ever going to have Denzel, Mims, Perriman, and probably Crowder on the same field. I mean, that's a decent wide receiver core. It's still Adam Gase. Okay, I'm not sitting here. We need to get Darnold into our lineups. But if you're going pure punt, a Darnold and Perriman stack, 3,700 Perriman, Mims, like what he's got to be bare minimum. Like those guys could have some big plays, big connections. I'm fading the Bills defense and actually going in on the Jets for DFS. So that's your bottom barrel punts for quarterbacks. Burrow he's got to be your guy, though, if you're going cheap at quarterback. Wide receivers under 5K. I mean, Diontae Johnson practicing in full off the injury report, but he's 4,200. He's only projected for 11% ownership. Like that should be, if I told you in week 2, Diontae Johnson, after he was looking smooth and 36% target share, like all those things were still in play. Claypool's emergence. Yeah, I think Claypool's the guy, but Claypool and Diontae stack with Big Ben could totally be viable. 4,200, I love it, 11%. And if that's what's keeping people off Claypool, even better. Mike Williams at 7% owned and 4,700, great play. Keenan Allen will be back. So this will be an interesting one to see, do those two coexist? Or does it go back to, let me just pepper Keenan Allen 40% of the time, which is what has been under Herbert? Could be. But Mike Williams could also moss the Jaguars' horrendous small corners all day and go for another 2 scores too. So 4,700, I love me some Mike Williams. Love Christian Kirk right in that range at 4,900, especially given I'm going Kyler Murray pretty much every lineup. So to complete that, must stack essential philosophy, you got to have one of those guys, at least Kirk and Hopkins, if not both. Kirk is really coming into his own. So I think he could have a big day. And then Traquan Smith, the last man standing over there for the Saints. COVID for Sanders, Hammy for Thomas, the most frustrating player to own this year. So Traquan under 5,000 could be a great play. We got for running backs under 5,000. We mentioned Drake already, 4,800, my favorite by far. I think Seattle's run D is pretty overrated. And I think we'll continue to see that. I think Gibson again, it's coming. The blow-up's coming. Why not against Dallas, right? That perfect spot for him. Latavius Murray, that pivot away from Kamara potentially, could be the one that falls in the end zone 2 or 3 times and just smashes 4,800 and gets you 20 points while everybody pays up for Kamara and he gets you 25. Save the money, spare the 5 points. That could be crazy. And obviously Bernard at 4,500 is the value, but I'm fading it. I'd rather have any of those 3 guys I listed above, even if Bernard's a little cheaper. And again, the Packers could be the nuts, that the must play. Should Aaron Jones sit, then I have to have one of Jamal Williams or A.J. Dillon at 4,000 in my lineups. The tight end landscape, I'm a typical punter at tight end, and it's done okay. Irv Smith last week. Troutman was a complete dud. But typically, Jordan Reed, week 2, my best week. Njoku could be that guy, but he's also projected to be the chalkiest tight end of the week, the most owned guy. And that seems like to me like people asking for a goose egg, a donut. I know that Hooper's out, 4,400. He's going to be out. And I know since he's pretty bad against tight ends, so Njoku theoretically coming into a great matchup, but we haven't seen him do anything yet this year. So to have him be everybody's smash play, I don't know if I would have been in on it if it was like a 5% ownership at like 15, 16 is the projection right now. Give me Ian Thomas at 1% and let him fall into the end zone twice. But I'm also probably going to go mid-price, like 4,800 or so. I love Noah Fant facing Chiefs. He's going to score and maybe scores twice. 2% ownership right now. The dude's had 15 and 16 his first 2 games. Dud against Tampa Bay, but the Chiefs are awful against tight ends. Good against every other position, but they're like 25th, I want to say, in terms of points. So like they're allowing a good amount. I like him, and I also like Jared Cook, 4,300. Could see more targets. Should see. Who else is there to throw to? We got Traquan Smith, we got Kamara, but Cook will be up on that target totem pole. So I like that for tight end cheap plays. All righty, guys. And let's go now into digging for that low-owned treasure, which is a crucial step. Finding that those gems that nobody else was on. Last week, we saw the contrarian plays more so than we've ever seen. Matt Ryan, 4.2%. MVS, 4%. Busted, but didn't end up mattering. Hurst, 1.4%. Swift, 4.2%. Steelers, 4.8%. By far, before that, we had only had like 1, maybe 2 sub-5 guys. This lineup had 5 sub-5 guys. So you don't have to get crazy, but you also need typically at least 1 sub-5 and usually 2, and last week again, 5 sub 5 plays. So who are some guys projected for sub 5% ownership that could end up going off this weekend? Well, as I've mentioned, that Tennessee versus Pittsburgh game, all of them 3% or so owned. Claypool at like 6% owned. Diontae at like 11%, but the quarterbacks both under 3%. Connor 4%. Jonnu like 6%. AJ Brown 5%. Claypool again 6%. Love it. Love all those options for sure as a low owned gold mine. We've already talked about our case for Swift and Gibson, but both of those guys coming in at 5% or under. Love them. Love to pivot away from Bernard, pay up a little bit of extra cash and get Drake or one of those two guys. Lat Murray being the other guy. We've again highlighted it, 4.4% owned, projected. Any one of those running backs could be that gem that ends up doing it for you. And it's typically been chalk tends to happen at running back more so than any position. It tends to be right at running back more than any position. But so far this year, contrarian plays at running back have been really the difference maker. Claypool, Brown, Crowder, as we mentioned, that those Steelers game, but also Crowder at 3%, 100 yards and 7 catches in every game with Darnold and a TD in 2 of 3. There's a history there, as ugly as it is, including a history against the Bills. He needs that deep arm, If you only have Flacco, yeah, you can see 13 targets like you did last week, but you're only going to get run after the catch. There's no deep element to that anymore. But when you got Darnold, that's where they've connected a couple efficient deep balls. Higgins, I'm surprised to see it at 5% owned. 5,300. He seems to me like one of the best points per dollar option there is. And then Deebo Samuel, welcome back with a nice score, another 18-point day last week. Patriots have struggled a bit with tackling in the secondary. I could see Deebo being a problem for this team. And at 5K at 3% owned, could love it. And then tight end, I love all the punts, but I'm probably going to find myself settling in for Cook at 4,300 and 4% owned. Noah Fant at 2% owned, 4,800. If I can squeeze it, that's my guy. Or Tunyon, 4,600, risk because no practice, but could end up just playing and having another 2-touchdown day. Both, all of them under 5%, all under 5K, all could go for 2 TDs and score 20 fantasy points. So I love all of them for sub 5% plays. All righty, guys. That is it for our live segments. The rest of the show is dedicated to you, your questions. So let me get on into the mailbag here and let us know what you got. Left Shepard on my bench. Did he end up having a monster? I can't remember the exact totals, but Tunes, how can you hold that against yourself? Like, he hadn't played in 5 weeks and hadn't made it through a full game. Like, you'll find something else. Stat corrections came in, went losing by less than 3 points to winning by 3.35. I was so hyped. What was the stat correction that did that for you, Mitchell? It's because you're tuned into the show. Good karma. But congrats, man. Nothing better than a late stat correction win, and nothing worse than being on the losing end of that. Picked up AB in all 3 leagues when you said a who. Thoughts on selling high in 1 league for who? K Cool Whip. I mean, it's got great name value, but he could also blow up. That's why he has good name value. So I'm not sitting like selling. You can let me know what are some guys you're considering, and I can let you know if that's what I would do. But he's going to be right in my top 70 to 50, right in that range of rest of season. So I'd want some good value if I'm selling AB. But glad you caught it when we were saying that, K Cool Whip. Mitchell Chavez, I'd be surprised if Godwin goes that far down, maybe 11 onward, but I don't see that happening till then for rest of the season. Yeah, it is a few weeks away, right? So that was just the gut reaction, Mitchell, when I was doing those. I might have to jump back in and check that rest of season out because it is still like week 10, but we have a nice chunk of time until then. We saw what Derrick Henry did last week. A.J. Dillon looks. Yes, the Henry. A.J. Dillon looms. Right, that's the exact type of guy that could steamroll them. I totally agree. Absolutely, but my favorite pickup right now to stash. Out there in 90% of leagues, go get A.J. Dillon and stash him. And if Jones sits, play him. I'm going to play him over McKinnon if Aaron Jones sits, just as a heads up. You should pick up A.J. Dillon Hills, by the way. Just oh, okay. I'll tell you about him later. As a Godwin owner, are you panicking? Says Eric L. Smith. Wouldn't be happy. Wouldn't be thrilled with this. No, but I'm not panicking. I am a little more worried for Godwin because I do think him and Brown are very similar. but I'm not going to panic. No, that's a little aggressive. If Aaron Jones ends up playing, would you still be willing to start Jamal over Lindsey or McKissick? That's close because it could flare up and then Jamal could go off. And it's not like it's like Lindsey or McKissick are these huge must plays. I'd probably go McKissick, but the ceiling is definitely with Jamal. Play A. Robinson or A. Cooper this week. Do you see Ramsey shadowing Robinson? I think Ramsey does shadow Robinson, yes, and I would go Cooper because of that. I'm low on Robinson this week because of the Ramsey shadow. If you listen to the Wednesday podcast, my higher, lower, Hail Mary, Robinson was my lower for that. Like the transitions need effect. Thank you, Mitch. We're trying to up our game here, brother. Do you see Juju finally showing up? Probably not. I mean, maybe out of nowhere, but I don't expect it. That graphic fire. Yes, Taylor doing some great stuff. Yeah, probably. Tannehill, Stafford, Herbert. Start one. If Stafford is not the start, he's getting the cut. Stafford could be the start because he's facing Atlanta. But if you want the roster space, then go Herbert and cut Stafford. Yeah. Antonio Gibson, Dakota Douglas, breakout against that horrid Cowboys defense. Or do you think McKissick will still get a decent amount of the carries? By the way, guys, anybody tuned in, if you're willing to give this, I should have said this right from the start, but the thumbs up on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope, the heart button, and of course, any shares into fantasy groups is so greatly appreciated to help us get discovered here. So thank you again so much for tuning in, spending your Saturday 11 a.m. with me. Antonio Gibson breakout against that horrid Cowboys defense. Or do you think McKissick will still get a decent amount of carries? I think this is the breakout, but I've also said that a couple times, and I have not been right yet. I'm just the hopeful owner here, Dakota. But if it's going to ever happen, of course, the Cowboys is a great option for it to happen against. I see Hunter Henry as a good grab too. Jags bad against tight end and averaging 7 targets. Yeah, definitely. Totally. Hunter Henry. The ceiling doesn't seem crazy with him. When we're talking DFS and trying to win the millie, and we've seen Henry in years past have a ceiling of 30. We've seen monster days. So maybe this is it, Mitch. That's an interesting toss out. I think he's around 4,600 too. To me though, he seems like he's below Keenan, below Mike Williams. Decent bet to get 30 in a TD. That's what he seems to be doing right now. But he could blow up. I don't hate that call at all. Hey Wolf. Picked up Gio and Dylan yesterday. Love it. Pretty worried about Jacobs this week. Should I start Gio or Dylan instead? You could do Gio because you're guaranteed the volume, but I personally wouldn't unless we hear all 5 of those linemen are now ruled out. I'm not overly worried right now. What are we worried about? Practice reps? It's not like he's running live with that line right now. I stick to Jacobs, but if you wanted to go one or the other, it'd be Gio. And then if we get Jones ruled out, that could be different. I think I'm going to be all in on the Thunder thighs. A.J. Dillon, should he play? PPR, R. Woods or Gio for the flex. Russell, the issue is Robert Woods might sit. He didn't practice this week, so I might just go Gio. He's a good enough option. Similar floor and ceiling to Woods. My guess would be Woods plays, but it's a tough defense anyways. So avoiding that headache of Monday Night Football replacement, I think I go Gio. Russell also asking Josh Allen or Watson, bigger play. Love them both, but Allen just destroys the Jets. It's a matter of can the Jets keep up and keep him throwing, although it might not matter. So I like Allen just a little bit more than Watson this week. I don't know. That's tough. They both have skyrocket upside. Russell. IDP League, Josh Jones added tackle. And he had a PD subtracted from him okay. So you got that independent points. Damn, that's crazy. Sarah Riley, half PPR, need 2. Gibson, David Johnson, Swift. Ooh, good options. I think I'm benching Gibson, even though I think the blow-up could be coming. He's the lowest floor of those two. Swift's got a low floor too, but I think I really like Swift this week. So give me David Johnson, give me Swift. James Robinson or A.J. Brown for flex. I'm going to go A.J. Brown. Robinson's steady, but Brown's got that ceiling. And I think even the Steelers matchup, I'm not too worried about Frazier Mack. Love the transitions between segments. Wolf up in his game. Cheers. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate the kind words. My man Taylor. Taylor Malone's got some serious skills with those graphics. All righty, Wolfpack. Well, that wraps up the questions, wraps up the content. So thank you so much for tuning in on Saturday. We will be live, of course, tomorrow, 11 a.m., and then live right after Red Zone, so 7:30-ish for our post-game and pre-game tailgates, going double tailgate on your Sunday, because why not get the fantasy started early and keep it running all through the night, baby. So cheers. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I, of course, am the Wolf at RotoStreetWolf on Twitter. All our content, RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed fantasy wolves. Thank you, guys. Check out my updated rankings. Check out everything on the site. We'll be updating the news throughout the day as well. See you guys later.